Hi everybody, this is David and welcome to our final Fireside Chat for Educational Leadership 655 Pupil Services and Non-Discrimination with Viterbo University. Our research module begins on Monday, March 14th and concludes on Friday, April 8th. Recap: upload your FEMA certificate. I appreciated your measured, due diligent consideration of student-led videos like Savannah, talking about disability, perhaps culture, or other areas. What do we have to weigh? The advantages and also the disadvantages, or also the kind of vulnerabilities which come into that. And where does that interface possibly with policy? So is this activity exclusive, as it centers on specific students? So that's something else to consider. And a few of you brought that point to our attention. Caution not to generalize one student's experiences as representing others. I experienced this in a different abilities day about 15 years ago. It was set up by staff and students, and there was a wheelchair. Students could sit in a wheelchair and roll up and down a hallway, navigate past some obstacles, wear gloves, and attempt to put a nut on a bolt, and to simulate, for example, some dexterity disabilities and mobility disabilities if you're using a wheelchair. That actually had mixed reviews. Some staff and students thought it was helpful. It kind of demystified some of that. For others, they said, well, it's not authentic, right? If you're someone who permanently uses a wheelchair, there's so many other considerations, right? Having sores from sitting in a wheelchair for long periods of time, having to transfer from a wheelchair to a seat, for example. And there's a thought that it was misrepresenting. What the school decided to do was not discontinue the activities, but to tweak them and to have more people involved and to be upfront with saying, this doesn't represent what it's like to have a disability. We're trying, though, to have you become more aware of different disabilities, different pieces of equipment that students might use, and to have you ask questions. Discretion is difficult to define, but we all know it exists. Many of you mentioned feedback and mentoring help increase staff discretion, as well as having staff collaborate with each other when making decisions. I added Kyle McCurritt's CPR video to this past week's class. That was made to cultivate support for Wisconsin's CPR bill. And then I worked with the student and his parents, the facility director, the DPI, as we brought that forward. But that was, again, the purpose of that, the construct of that was to inform students about the importance of CPR. Week 7 shoutouts. Lindsay E mentioned that having staff and students share their experiences displayed a unity across her former district. She also mentioned students being their authentic selves, and I think that's a concept that could be defined by the students. What does it mean to be authentic? And by answering that question, you'll also discover the biases and expectations that influence youth to conform to some type of adult societal persona. Kelly mentioned that student disability awareness videos bring forward questions of 1, the context of the creation, 2, opportunity for others, 3, purpose, and 4, distribution. So I like those, going through those and having consideration. There must be a protocol for any student videos that are generated as a school activity, especially when those videos share personal information. This also should be overtly discussed with teachers to ensure protocol and to allow teachers to ask questions. I've seen students create short videos or PowerPoints, and they're focused on, here, learn more about me. They've presented those then to the case manager that they'll have in the following year. Those typically never go on a public drive. Those are used for self-advocacy, for demonstration of competency with technology and presenting, and of course, to enable the future case manager to have more insight, more awareness about that student. It's an in-school presentation and it's not being distributed on the internet. JoEllen wrote that it is very difficult to teach and model discretion. In addition to mentoring, sometimes people's discretion improves from practicing making decisions. So to break that down, you can practice inventorying options and then making a decision from there. I've observed this in tabletop safety drills. Discretion improves as people become comfortable with making decisions. Kacy shared that discretion looks different at the elementary level compared to middle and high school, in part due to the different schedules. As an elementary teacher, you might have 20 students for much of the day. So you're building stronger relationships. You're tending to handle more matters within the classroom, not involving administration. But once you get into middle and high school, a teacher possibly interfaces with 150 students during a day as they rotate through their classes. The teacher also doesn't necessarily have the context of what happened in an earlier class. If there was something in a first hour class, if a student arrived late, third hour teacher might not know that. There's also something else that Kacy pointed out, which is spot on, and that's when students become middle school and into high school, they're asserting more of their agency or their own person, right? We had talked about that in last week's Fireside Chat. Sometimes as they assert that, teachers might become frustrated because they feel that the student isn't complying, and then the student is sent to the office. So that's where coaching and professional development, as Kacy shared, has a significant role. Maretta spoke of the value of check-ins with calibrating discretion. This is especially important considering turnover in staff. You might have an accurate understanding of the discretion and decision-making tendencies of a teacher that you've worked with for 5 years, but not so much with somebody who just started this year. She also mentioned there are non-negotiables. There are times when, as a director of Pupil Services, staff need to make you aware of these things. That could be if there's an incident that involves drugs, vaping, guns. Nikole gave a 4-component tutorial for coaching and calibration of discretion. I thought this was excellent, so thank you, Nikole. Here were her questions. The first one, how would you want someone to treat your child in this situation? Am I using the standard of care that I would want for myself or someone in my family to receive? 2, if the tables were turned, how would you feel about your decision? Does the rationale seem ethical, and does it constitute doing no harm? 3, what would a reasonable person do in this situation? And 4, what is the end goal in making this decision? Are you hoping for a short-term solution, kind of a Band-Aid solution, or a long-term sustainable change? So excellent. Reminds me of institutional review board process that is used in research, kind of that do no harm approach. Week 8 and beyond. This is it. This is our last Fireside Chat, right? We're now taking this time to focus on that final project. So Moodle, you're not required to post to any discussion questions for the remainder of this class. If you had questions that you didn't respond to earlier in class, go back and make sure you've made your post to those. I have a few resources posted in week 8 that you might find that will benefit you in assembling your final project. One is the Alexandria, Virginia documents for assessing a pupil services program. I think those documents do a great job of combining interviews with data, because oftentimes documents, reports tend to get very data rich and not a lot of interviews, so you don't really have that context of understanding what's happening at the school. You see a lot of numbers. So there's, quoted interviews in that Alexandria, Virginia document. So I like the way it's put together. As you work on your pupil services 5-year report for the DPI, whenever that happens in your district, it will be similar to the Alexandria, Virginia document approach. And maybe you can bring some of that into your DPI report. You have the option of submitting your final assignment in Moodle as a paper or opting for a 20-minute phone call with me. I posted a link in class. There's a Google document, and you can go in and start to sign up if you're interested in the phone call option. The first date for phone calls is March 29th. The phone call will be, again, 20 minutes long, and we will be addressing the rubric for the final assignment. You don't need to email me any notes or documents, anything like that, but it will be a brisk conversation going over the points in that document. So use this research module to gather information, right? You're going to interview teachers and administrators and possibly talk with students. Look at your Board of Education policy specific to pupil services and non-discrimination. Bring in a balance of qualitative and quantitative. So when we get to the final assignment, not that you're submitting a lot of numbers, but it could be, here are some numbers, and then here's also what people said about staff induction, or what we're starting to observe for long COVID, maybe with anxiety or mental fog, or whatever these terms are, and how that might change counseling services, or how that might change overall professional development for staff. Anything you're observing with English language learners, that would all be included in that final project. We also talked early in class about the range of CISA services that are available. So this is a time to re-examine your CISA services, partnering with your neighboring districts, kind of all of that. All right, everybody, that's it. You've done a terrific job in this class. You can start signing up if you want to do the phone call. Final project, submit the paper by April 8th. Contact me if you have any questions. Otherwise, this will be, again, the last Fireside Chat, and you do not have to post any discussion, question, responses going forward.